Members, I just want to take a few moments to share with you a few thoughts of mine on this conformity bill that's in front of us today. It would come as no surprise. I think I've talked to just about everybody in this chamber at one time or another about what I truly believe to be the problem in South Carolina as far as our tax policy goes will not, no matter what we do on this conformity discussion, solve our problem. However, this conformity bill does do what I think we all agree we need to do in the short period of time that we have before the remainder of the year, and that is to address those, at least those inequalities on a one-year basis by conforming, as we always do in this chamber. Now, during this process, it was a challenge because what we're trying to do is, when the federal government made changes to their tax code, which I believe are positive in the scheme of things, that didn't change South Carolina's tax policy one iota. The decisions that we've made and have always made were not affected by the code, but the way that the federal government calculates that code certainly affected us, and we met as a committee, and many of the challenges that we oftentimes had to pull ourselves back from were to try to make too many policy decisions within the conformity bill. And the reality is you just can't make policy decisions, significant policy decisions in that conformity bill, because as I've always described our tax code, and any tax code really, not just ours, is whenever you start monkeying with the tax code, it's like squeezing a balloon. I can squeeze a balloon in one area and all it does is send the air to another part of that balloon. And before you know it, when we're making or trying to make good policy decisions in those discussions, all of a sudden you end up with kind of Frankenstein's monster, and all of a sudden the conformity bill turns into something that is not something that either one of us individually or certainly either side of the aisle is going to support. So I appreciated the work that was put in by the committee to get to a point where we have a conformity bill that, as they say in the medical arena, does no harm, or comes as close as we possibly can to doing no harm. And that's what's been done here. The underlying problem, though, remains with us, and something that we're going to have to address, and I want to commend the Chairman of Finance for allowing us to, going forward, to address those concerns, is we have got to take a look at South Carolina's tax policy in a more holistic approach. Since the basic policy has been created over 50 years ago, a lot of things have changed. The economy has changed. The way we do things has changed. We have a tax code in our state that is narrowing rather than broadening. And every little tweak that we do, and I think every attempt to change the tax code during our sessions with little bites around, or nibbles around the edges, is there to create a better environment because someone or something or some industry has brought to our attention an inequality. But by doing those nibbling around the edges, we simply compound that inequality. So the agreement that was made was, let's get a conformity bill that does what we need to do in the current year to make sure that the current tax policy and the taxpayers of South Carolina are not damaged. But let's look at the policy going forward. You know, right now we have almost half of the people that earn income in the state of South Carolina do not pay income taxes. We have a very high tax rate on sales of items, but we have a very small menu of items that we actually apply that tax to. We have very high property taxes in some areas, and because of Act 388 that was passed a number of years ago, we've created an environment where our counties struggle to recruit and attract businesses, but more importantly, to me anyway, not so much to recruit and attract, but to allow the companies that were born there and bred there and have supported the people that live in those communities those people end up getting the short end of the stick in many cases because counties are forced to deal with a fee in lieu. So we've got a challenging property tax situation. We've got a questionable income tax scenario. We have a less than ideal sales tax scenario, and all the while we are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking our tax base. That will ultimately negatively affect us, and it will certainly provide, and I believe most people would agree with me, that government doesn't need to be all things to all people, but for the things that are core functions of government, we need to have sustainable revenue to support those things. And a poor tax policy will ultimately restrict our ability for those revenues and make very difficult decisions for us in down economic times. So the point of this is, I think we have a conformity bill today that protects the taxpayer in South Carolina for the current tax year as we deal with the ramifications of the larger federal tax policy. We're helping families in this bill that were really damaged the most by the changes. With repealing the personal exemptions at the federal level certainly narrowed the tax base much more than the standard deduction increase has helped. So we had to figure out a way to address those inequities in South Carolina so those families with those children that counted on those exemptions were not damaged, and we did that. I think we've got a better scenario than certainly not conforming. We have a better scenario certainly than just a simple conformity. We have to be honest with you, have a better scenario than what was passed across the lobby to us. We've improved upon that. I think the members of the House that are paying attention to this recognize that it's a better solution, particularly for the families of South Carolina. And then now we have the ability to step forward going on into next year and beyond of really addressing the inequities in our tax code and fixing that so it's more efficient, more modernized, and can be a benefit to not only the people of South Carolina, but the businesses of South Carolina as we move forward. And I look forward to that opportunity. I know there's a number of members that have been assigned to that committee. I look forward to working with you for the betterment of South Carolina and getting a code that works for us going forward and not just in 2018-19. Thank you, Mr. President.